Billy Bob Thornton and Angelina Jolie were two well-known public figures whose relationship gained wide attention in the early 2000s. Their marriage, which lasted only a short time, became one of the most talked-about celebrity unions of its era. Over the years, both continued their careers while rarely addressing details of their divorce. 2 decades later, comments made by Thornton added new public context to events that shaped the end of their marriage. This documentary follows a clear timeline of their relationship, marriage, separation, and later reflections, focusing on verified facts, public statements, and how their lives developed after the divorce. Billy Bob Thornton was born in 1955 in Hot Springs, Arkansas, and grew up in a working-class household where daily life followed simple routines. His father worked as a teacher and basketball coach, and his mother focused on caring for the family. From an early age, Thornton showed interest in music, writing, and performance, often using these outlets as a way to express thoughts that were difficult to share openly. As a teenager, he played drums in local bands, dreaming of a future that stretched far beyond his small hometown. Few around him expected those dreams to turn into reality, yet he continued to chase them quietly. In his early 20s, Thornton moved to Los Angeles, where the early years were marked by rejection, financial stress, and uncertainty. He worked odd jobs, including landscaping and door-to-door sales, while attending auditions that rarely led anywhere. During this time, he also wrote screenplays late into the night, often rewriting scenes repeatedly in search of the right tone. One lesser-known fact from this period is that Thornton once considered giving up acting altogether to focus solely on music, but a small writing opportunity convinced him to keep going. That decision would later shape the course of his career in ways few could have predicted. His breakthrough came in the mid-1990s with Sling Blade, a deeply personal project that he wrote, directed, and starred in. The film gained attention for its quiet storytelling and emotional depth, earning Thornton an Academy Award for Best Adapted Screenplay. Almost overnight, he became known as a serious creative voice in Hollywood. Yet success brought new pressure, forcing him to adjust to public attention and demanding schedules. Behind closed doors, friends noticed that the sudden fame created both opportunity and strain, raising questions about how long this balance could last. Angelina Jolie was born in 1975 in Los Angeles into a family already shaped by the film industry. Her father, actor Jon Voight, was well known, while her mother worked as an actress and later focused on raising her children. From a young age, Jolie was exposed to auditions, film sets, and public attention. As a teenager, she studied acting formally, while also working as a fashion model. One lesser-known detail from her early years is that she struggled with feelings of isolation despite her public environment, often using writing and art as emotional outlets. During the 1990s, Jolie's performances in films like Hackers, George Wallace, and Girl, Interrupted earned critical praise. Her ability to portray complex emotional states quickly set her apart from many of her peers. By her early 20s, she had won major awards and was viewed as one of Hollywood's most promising young stars. However, rapid success also brought intense media focus, shaping how her personal life became part of her public identity. By the late 1990s, both Thornton and Jolie occupied powerful positions in the industry, moving within overlapping creative circles. Their individual journeys, shaped by ambition, personal struggle, and professional pressure, were slowly guiding them toward a shared crossroads. And at the time, no one yet realized how a single film project would soon connect these two very different paths, setting in motion a relationship that would quietly change both of their lives. Billy Bob Thornton and Angelina Jolie first met in 1999 on the set of the film Pushing Tin. At the time, both were in very different places in their lives and careers. Thornton was already established, known for his quiet personality and creative control over his projects. Jolie, still in her early 20s, was rising fast, gaining attention for her strong screen presence and bold personal style. Their first interactions were professional, shaped by long hours on set and shared scenes that required close collaboration. But those early working moments began to shift in ways few people around them fully understood. Cast and crew later described a fast connection between the two. Conversations extended beyond filming, often continuing off-set. One lesser-known detail from that period is that Thornton was still engaged to another woman when filming began, a fact that quietly complicated the situation behind the scenes. Yet the emotional closeness between Thornton and Jolie grew quickly, fueled by shared interests in music, writing, and intense personal expression. At the time, neither spoke openly about the depth of the bond forming, but the change in behavior was noticeable to those around them. Within months, their relationship became public. Media attention followed almost immediately. The age difference, their different public images, and their strong personalities made the pairing stand out. Public appearances showed a level of closeness that felt unusual even by Hollywood standards. Interviews from that period showed both speaking about each other in direct, open ways, often describing the connection as immediate and deep. But behind the public words, there were already signs of a relationship moving faster than the structures around it could support. In May 2000, less than a year after meeting, they married in a private ceremony in Las Vegas. The wedding was simple, but the reaction was not. News spread quickly, and their marriage became a constant subject in entertainment media. Their public image grew more intense, shaped by symbolic gestures like wearing vials of each other's blood and speaking openly about emotional dependence. One lesser-known detail is that close friends privately expressed concern about how fast the relationship was moving, though those concerns were never shared publicly at the time. Their daily life quickly became shaped by attention, travel, and professional pressure. Both continued working on separate projects, often in different cities and countries. This meant long periods apart, followed by intense periods together. That rhythm created a pattern of emotional closeness followed by distance. Publicly, the relationship appeared strong. Privately, the structure of their lives made stability harder to maintain. Interviews from that period focused on passion and connection, but rarely on long-term plans or shared goals. Questions about the future were often answered in vague terms. At the time, no one openly questioned whether the speed of the relationship would create deeper problems later. But the pace itself became a quiet pressure point, shaping decisions that would soon carry lasting consequences. And as their marriage moved forward under constant attention and growing career demands, a silent imbalance began forming, one that neither fully addressed, but that would soon begin to reshape everything they thought they were building together. After their wedding in May 2000, Billy Bob Thornton and Angelina Jolie entered a phase of life shaped by constant attention and heavy work schedules. Public appearances became frequent, and every movement was closely watched. Interviews, red carpet events, and promotional tours filled their calendars. While both had grown used to public exposure, their relationship now placed them under a new level of scrutiny. Every gesture, comment, and decision was examined, often without context. Thornton continued acting in major films while also focusing on music and writing. His days often began early and ended late, divided between studio work, rehearsals, and filming. Jolie, meanwhile, accepted increasingly demanding film roles that required long travel and extended time on set. One lesser-known detail from this period is that Jolie often traveled with notebooks filled with handwritten thoughts and ideas, using quiet moments between scenes to reflect and plan. These habits pointed to a growing shift in her priorities that was not yet visible to the public. As time passed, their schedules rarely aligned. Weeks could pass without meaningful time together. When they did reunite, the intensity of their connection remained strong, but the rhythm of separation followed by emotional closeness created strain. Friends observed that while their bond was sincere, the pace of their lives left little room for calm or routine. Small disagreements often lingered longer than expected because there was little time to resolve them fully. During this period, Jolie also began traveling internationally, visiting regions affected by conflict and poverty. These early humanitarian trips deeply influenced her perspective. One lesser-known fact is that her first visits to refugee camps were meant to be brief, yet she stayed longer than planned, forming connections that changed how she viewed her role in the world. These experiences quietly reshaped her long-term goals, adding new dimensions to her identity beyond acting. Thornton's life remained more centered on familiar routines. He valued stability, time at home, and creative work in controlled environments. While he respected Jolie's expanding interests, the difference in lifestyle began to widen. Their conversations increasingly reflected different priorities. Publicly, they remained affectionate and supportive, but privately, the growing distance was becoming harder to ignore. Media interviews from this time often showed smiling faces and warm words, but subtle shifts in language hinted at change. Statements became less certain about shared futures and more focused on individual journeys. Questions about children, long-term plans, or settling down were answered carefully, often redirected toward career topics. At the time, few recognized these signals for what they were. Behind closed doors, the balance between love and life direction was becoming fragile. Each new project, trip, and responsibility added pressure to a relationship already stretched by distance and expectation. And without fully realizing it, both were slowly stepping onto separate paths, setting the stage for a turning point that would soon reshape everything they believed their marriage could become. By early 2002, signs of strain within the marriage of Billy Bob Thornton and Angelina Jolie had become harder to ignore. Public appearances grew less frequent, and when they did appear together, the energy seemed more restrained. Interviews shifted in tone, focusing more on individual work than shared life. Behind closed doors, the distance created by constant travel, separate schedules, and changing priorities was quietly reshaping the foundation of their relationship. In February 2002, the announcement came. The couple confirmed their separation after less than 2 years of marriage. The statement was brief and measured, offering no detailed explanation. It emphasized mutual respect and personal growth, avoiding direct discussion of conflict. Yet the timing raised questions. Just weeks earlier, both had spoken about ongoing projects and future plans. The sudden change suggested that important decisions had already been made long before the public was informed. One lesser-known detail from this period is that close associates noticed the separation had been discussed privately for months. Conversations about long-term goals, lifestyle choices, and emotional needs had become increasingly difficult. Despite public appearances, many around them sensed that the marriage was no longer moving in a shared direction. These private realities, though rarely discussed, formed the backdrop of their public announcement. Legal divorce proceedings followed later that year. Both parties maintained a restrained public posture, avoiding public disputes or detailed interviews. Court documents remained limited, and there were no prolonged legal battles. This quiet approach stood in contrast to the intense public attention surrounding their relationship only months earlier. The simplicity of the legal process suggested a mutual understanding that separation was the necessary step forward. During this period, Jolie increased her international travel, deepening her involvement in humanitarian efforts. Thornton returned to film sets and music projects, focusing on work as a stabilizing force. Their paths continued to move apart, each shaped by different demands and emotional rhythms. Friends noted that communication between them became more formal, centered mainly on logistics rather than shared reflection. Public curiosity remained high, but clear answers never came. Media outlets speculated, but neither side offered details. The silence itself became part of the story, leaving unanswered questions about what truly shifted behind closed doors. And as the legal process moved toward its conclusion, it became clear that the public version of their marriage had ended, while a more private reckoning was still unfolding beneath the surface, one that would only slowly come into focus. Following the finalization of their divorce in 2003, both Angelina Jolie and Billy Bob Thornton entered new phases of life shaped by expansion, reinvention, and shifting public identity. Jolie's career moved into a period of rapid growth. Major film roles followed, including leading performances in global box office successes. Her visibility increased, but so did her involvement in humanitarian work, which soon became central to her public image. Her travels to refugee camps and conflict zones deepened. Over time, she built long-term relationships with international aid organizations and later became a special envoy for the United Nations. One lesser-known aspect of this period is that Jolie often prepared extensively before each trip, studying regional history and humanitarian policy, signaling that her engagement extended beyond symbolic visits. These experiences gradually reshaped her personal identity and long-term goals. Thornton, meanwhile, maintained a steady presence in film and television, balancing acting roles with music projects. He formed his band and returned frequently to touring, which provided a different kind of creative outlet. Friends described this period as one of recalibration, as he sought stability through structured routines and familiar environments. His later work in television brought renewed recognition, introducing him to a new generation of viewers. Both developed new personal relationships and family lives, further distancing themselves from their shared past. Public interviews during this time rarely referenced their marriage. Instead, conversations focused on career development, creative growth, and future ambitions. The relationship that once dominated headlines gradually became a historical footnote within much larger life stories. Yet public curiosity never fully disappeared. Occasional mentions of their past relationship continued to surface, especially during interviews marking career milestones. These brief references were often measured and neutral, offering little insight into private experience. Still, they hinted that deeper reflections remained unspoken. As years passed, the separation came to represent a turning point rather than a defining moment. Each moved forward, shaped by choices that carried long-term influence. But with time also came distance, perspective, and reflection, setting the stage for later comments that would finally provide a clearer view into what had quietly unfolded years earlier. More than a decade after the divorce, Billy Bob Thornton began to offer occasional reflections on his past marriage during interviews. These remarks were calm, thoughtful, and carefully worded. Rather than focusing on emotion, he described practical realities, different lifestyles, long-term goals, and personal rhythms that gradually drifted apart. His words did not contradict earlier public statements, but they added layers of context that had previously remained absent. Thornton explained that Jolie's increasing involvement in global humanitarian work had shaped her life in ways that were difficult to align with his own routines. One lesser-known detail he shared was how extended international travel altered daily communication, creating emotional distance even during periods of closeness. These subtle changes, he suggested, accumulated over time, influencing decisions that were not sudden but steadily evolving. Media attention returned briefly as these reflections circulated, yet the tone remained respectful and restrained. Jolie did not publicly challenge these accounts, allowing the narrative to remain balanced. Observers noted that both seemed to view their relationship as a meaningful chapter rather than a source of unresolved conflict. Thornton also spoke about how the marriage influenced his understanding of commitment and personal boundaries. Without revealing private moments, he acknowledged that intense emotional connections can sometimes outpace practical compatibility. These comments offered insight into how perspective changes with time, especially when viewed through the lens of experience. Still, many details remained unspoken. The full emotional landscape of those years was never fully outlined. What was shared suggested growth, acceptance, and a recognition that life directions sometimes diverge without blame. Yet beneath the measured words, there remained hints of deeper complexity. Both developed new personal relationships and family lives, further distancing themselves from their shared past. Public interviews during this time rarely referenced their marriage. Instead, conversations focused on career development, creative growth, and future ambitions. The relationship that once dominated headlines gradually became a historical footnote within much larger life stories. Yet public curiosity never fully disappeared. Occasional mentions of their past relationship continued to surface, especially during interviews marking career milestones. These brief references were often measured and neutral, offering little insight into private experience. Still, they hinted that deeper reflections remained unspoken. As years passed, the separation came to represent a turning point rather than a defining moment. Each moved forward, shaped by choices that carried long-term influence. But with time also came distance, perspective, and reflection, setting the stage for later comments that would finally provide a clearer view into what had quietly unfolded years earlier. More than a decade after the divorce, Billy Bob Thornton began to offer occasional reflections on his past marriage during interviews. These remarks were calm, thoughtful, and carefully worded. Rather than focusing on emotion, he described practical realities, different lifestyles, long-term goals, and personal rhythms that gradually drifted apart. His words did not contradict earlier public statements, but they added layers of context that had previously remained absent. Thornton explained that Jolie's increasing involvement in global humanitarian work had shaped her life in ways that were difficult to align with his own routines. One lesser-known detail he shared was how extended international travel altered daily communication, creating emotional distance even during periods of closeness. These subtle changes, he suggested, accumulated over time, influencing decisions that were not sudden but steadily evolving. Media attention returned briefly as these reflections circulated, yet the tone remained respectful and restrained. Jolie did not publicly challenge these accounts, allowing the narrative to remain balanced. Observers noted that both seemed to view their relationship as a meaningful chapter rather than a source of unresolved conflict. Thornton also spoke about how the marriage influenced his understanding of commitment and personal boundaries. Without revealing private moments, he acknowledged that intense emotional connections can sometimes outpace practical compatibility. These comments offered insight into how perspective changes with time, especially when viewed through the lens of experience. Still, many details remained unspoken. The full emotional landscape of those years was never fully outlined. What was shared suggested growth, acceptance, and a recognition that life directions sometimes diverge without blame. Yet beneath the measured words, there remained hints of deeper complexity. As public understanding slowly shifted, the story of their relationship transformed from spectacle into reflection. And with these later statements, a clearer outline of their separation finally emerged, revealing that the end was not driven by conflict, but by two lives moving steadily in different directions, long before anyone fully recognized the distance between them. The marriage between Billy Bob Thornton and Angelina Jolie remains one of the most discussed celebrity relationships of the early 2000s. Its public visibility, emotional openness, and rapid progression shaped how audiences viewed modern celebrity partnerships. Yet with time, the relationship has come to represent something quieter, a reflection of how personal growth and evolving priorities can reshape even the strongest connections. For Jolie, the marriage marked a transition into a broader global role. Her humanitarian efforts, later family life, and leadership positions built a legacy centered on international advocacy and social responsibility. Her public identity shifted steadily, moving beyond film and into long-term global engagement. This transformation continues to influence how her early career and relationships are viewed in hindsight. For Thornton, the experience reinforced the importance of stability, creative control, and emotional balance. His later work reflects a careful selection of roles and projects, favoring depth and structure over constant visibility. Music and storytelling remain central elements of his identity, offering grounding in a career marked by public attention. Together, their relationship offers insight into the challenges faced by individuals navigating intense public life while searching for personal alignment. The timeline of their meeting, marriage, and separation highlights how external success does not always guarantee internal harmony. Over time, their story shifted from public fascination to a quieter narrative about growth, transition, and acceptance. Even years later, their brief marriage continues to surface in conversations about celebrity culture and emotional connection. Yet it now stands as one chapter within two much larger journeys. What remains is a sense that both moved forward with clarity, shaping lives that extended far beyond that shared moment. And as their paths continue to unfold, the echoes of that brief union still remind observers how powerful connections can rise quickly, change slowly, and leave lasting impressions long after the public spotlight has moved on.